The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
So we've got Joseph Scott Morgan. Thank you for being on the show, Joseph.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
Welcome aboard.
Yeah, you bet.
Now you.
I think that going back to Jim Baker, if they had pre-ordered some of those anointed prayer cloths and had those mailed to him, and he could have self-anointed, he may have felt better. So you never know. You got to prepare. You talk about preparation. You really got to prep. So you never know what's around each corner.
Well, this is true, and he's selling condominiums too now in the Ozarks.
Well, hey, you got to do what a man's got to do. What a man's got to do to get by, right?
Well, Joseph, you brought this up, so and I'm going to walk through this door. One of my favorite ever was this pastor. It's been some years ago, but if you wanted the anointing, he placed his handprint on shower caps. And we're selling these shower caps, and you put it on, and it was like him laying hands on you.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Wow. Huh.
That's a good
idea. That is my favorite.
Yeah, that is quite, maybe they could kick it up another level and, I don't know, maybe look into condom blessing. So you never know. It could be a trend. Could be a trend.
Well, there you go. Kevin does that now. So, but that's a different story, and we have to be on later at night to talk about that. But
okay, all right.
That brings up, so this guy that's putting his hands in these shower caps and sending it to you, he's really putting his DNA in that, isn't he?
Yeah, sure. Touch DNA, man. That's all the rage now.
Now I
think that it's going to, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, because we've had some guests on now that have said that the touch DNA is actually not a good thing. It's a bad thing because we can't really determine where the DNA, how it got there. And he was referring to Joan Benet Ramsey and about how on her panties they found touch DNA, and that was traced back to the manufacturing plant. So how could we guarantee all the DNA on the clothing and the bodies are really associated with criminals?
Yeah, it's a slippery slope, I think, and plus you're only getting a fragment of DNA with this as well. So that's another complication, that kind of springs forward from all of this. Look, I teach it. I'm the Distinguished Scholar of Applied Forensics at Jacksonville State University in Alabama. And one of the things that I teach in my forensic investigations classes is because it's like, years and years ago where you can, where you can just kind of go in and have a half-hearted plan about how you're going to process a death scene. Now we enter into these environments as if you have to approach them like you're almost entering into a searchable environment. Because with the recognition of the fact that we have these trace amounts of DNA, what I tell students to do, and of course your listeners can do this too, and it's just kind of a point of reference, take a little talcum powder, okay? Put it in the palm of your hand and just kind of gently blow. Now, if you get the idea of how delicate that is, you can go by a factor of about 10 to give you an idea of how delicate touch DNA is. It's so easy to destroy. It's so easy to cross-contaminate. It's so easy to lose from the perspective of processing. Movement of bodies, all these sorts of things. And with Jean Benet, I was involved in, one of those series of things that they did last year in the wake of the special, the long-running special that was on television with Jim Clemente. I did something with CNN for that, and that came up, relative to the discovery of DNA, that these panties that were manufactured somewhere, I don't know, Malaysia or one of these places, very well could have been contaminated on the line there. And God only knows how well this evidence was preserved, long term. That's one of the reasons that you'd mentioned that I believe Steve and I met at CrimeCon. I was on the panel with the survivors from the Golden State Killer, and a remarkable case, by the way. And going back all that time, we have this remnant of DNA that's left behind that they were able to match up. And I think that that's a bit more than just simply, touch DNA, but still, that gives you an idea, the fact that they were able to do that. Now, from, a civil libertarian standpoint, it causes a shiver run up my spine a bit, with these databases. But, it's a brave new world, guys. That's the nature of it. I don't even, for my part, I have these discussions with people many times, about the idea of fingerprinting. What we've been taught all these years and these things that we do, looking for partial prints, and the databases that we use, and just in intake. When people are brought into jail, I submit to you, I don't even think that we'll do even a digital fingerprint on people within the next decade. I think that everybody will probably undergo buccal mucosal swabbing, and that'll just go into a general database, a local database, and we'll have a whole new set of things, of problems that we have to concern ourselves with, good and bad. So it is a brave new world.
Well, Joseph, we're doing that right now. I work at Madison County Jail right here in Huntsville, and everybody that comes through the door now, we're actually taking DNA swabs from.
Right. Yeah. And I think that it's part of me is scary. I don't know if it's scary for me. I mean, even years ago when I remember I was still over in Georgia, and the first time that they told me at a driver's license office I was going to have to give them a fingerprint for my driver's license. It was one thing. I was in the military, I was in public safety and all that, and I was going into this thing to do work, and the rationale for it was, well, I remember at the time I was working for the ME in Atlanta, and I remember at the time this civil servant was behind the counter. I was like, I don't want to give you my fingerprint. And she looked at me and said, you don't understand, we're doing this because it's going to make bodies easier to identify. Like, she was going to shock me with that. And I'm thinking, Jesus, man, really, that's your rationale for it. So, it's been coming. And you can't really step off the track. You're staring at that single light coming down the tracks at you, and it's going to hit us full force.
Well, let me ask you this, and Al, mentioned this early on in the interview in jest, but I really feel this way. Do you feel that these sites, kind of like Ancestry.com and 23andMe, that is a polite way of getting your DNA when you won't give it willingly during, like you said, your driver's license, or, we want your DNA here. Well, I don't have to, that's Fourth Amendment issue. So we have these polite sites over here that are getting your DNA. Yeah. And if you want to kick it up to another conspiracy level, I think that one of these sites is controlled by an unnamed religious body. And so that in and of itself has another scary ring to it. I don't know where this information is going.
If I could interrupt, that's Ancestry.com, and what they are is they've run and owned by the Mormons, and what they're doing is gathering information from you as well as giving you information. But they take that information and they have a baptism for the dead. So what they're doing is they're baptizing the dead after they get information from you, and that's sort of we've kind of covered that on the show once. So I'm not scared.
Yeah, and I think well, it's got a whole nother level of creepy to it. First off,
Yeah. Oh, it does. Yeah.
I think that one of the things here is this. I had a conversation with two attorneys off the air the other day about this. Actually, I apologize. It wasn't off the air. Well, it was off the air. We were at CrimeCon, and we were sitting around talking, and I was asking them, because I'm not a lawyer, I'm just an old death investigator, and and I was saying, how is this gonna hold up? If you take this and apply constitutional tests to it, and their simple answer to me was that the courts now, from what they're hearing from a lot of these jurists, is that it's the equivalent of throwing away a piece of garbage in a trash can just off your property. That the police have the ability to go in there and extricate that, and that argument does not seem valid to me, because I think that when you enter into this kind of contractual agreement with one of these sites, you don't go into this with the expectation that, I think that there is an expectation of privacy here. And I think that the courts are kind of leaning toward this idea that you have no expectation of privacy. Now, from a forensic standpoint, hey, dude, man, it's fascinating, it's fantastic. But, there's more to life than forensics, right? I mean, there's more to it, because if you don't have your freedom, what good is forensics? And so I take it makes me raise my eyebrow. And, I've had people come in with the argument, no, you don't understand the pain that these families have gone through, and now this thing's been solved. Yeah, I kind of do understand the pain. I've got homicide victims in my family. I've borne witness to more deaths than most in two major cities, in New Orleans and Atlanta. So yeah, I can get down in the dirt with you. Does an individual's pain supersede our individual rights and our collective rights? And that's a big question. It'll be a question that people far brighter than me will have to answer, or better at making an argument than I. But it has a level of scariness to it for me, I think.
Joseph, this may sound a mad question, and you probably get asked it all the time, so apologies if that's the case. What situation have you been in where you found it, I suppose, the most challenging as a forensic investigator? So what sort of situation would give you the most challenges?
Well, understand that for me, I'm kind of a different animal, because I'm not like a typical crime scene guy. For me, my background, I was the eyes and the ears of the forensic pathologist in the field. So when I would go out either with the Jefferson Parish Coroner's office in New Orleans, when I was just starting out, and at the time I was I was identified as the youngest medicolegal death investigator in America, by a guy named William Eckert, who you can check him out. He's kind of a seminal force in forensic pathology. I worked with him for a little bit. I had no business doing what I was doing for a living at that age, but that's all I've ever done. And then working with the ME in Atlanta, where I was a senior investigator, my world is different than a standard forensics guy, because I'm going out seeking to determine manner, cause of death, and identification, and bringing that data back in from the field for the forensic pathologist. And so, contrary to what you see in television, forensic pathologists do not, and I mean do not, go out into the field. It's people like me. And so, as far as challenges go, in my particular field, the biggest challenge that I faced, and I write about this in my memoir, is, and what really took a toll on me, was next of kin notifications. I did over 2,000 in person over the course of my career, and it wears on you. The science is the easy part, guys. It's what keeps you going. But in my field, and I think not just in my field, but I think from a mental health standpoint, why will only get you so far over a period of time. You can only ask the question why so many times. Science wears thin after a while. But I found my love and joy for it again now teaching at university. So I'm sorry to go a long way around the barn answering that question, but I kind of have to set the scene for you as to who I am and, you know, what I did for a living for so many years and now what I teach about.
In terms of when we deliver those very, very difficult messages to people, Joseph, it's not the same thing entirely. I was a child protection social worker in the UK for many years, and so had to deliver very difficult messages to people about potentially going to court to look at where their child should live permanently, or to deliver a message that their child shouldn't live with them. So those kind of scenarios are so emotive. Did you find yourself during the course of your career rewording things, learning how to reframe things so that messages were easier understood and captured by people? Or did you take a different approach?
It evolved over a period of time because, you know, you can go to classes and learn how to interact with families, but the problem is a lot of the classes that you go to, the people are not actually doing it, and that's a huge problem. It's that way. Look, guys, I mean, it's that way even if you're talking about radio or broadcasting. You can go to a university and have people sit there and tell you, well, this is the way it's done, but they don't know how it's really done, or maybe they haven't done it in years. For me, it became more of a game of survival and how I was going to do it. In the beginning, I'd find myself really circumventing the final step, you know, where you tell them that they're dead. And in actuality, when you look back, that's one of the cruelest things that you can do. You badge them when you show up at the door. They know that something bad has happened. I found, for me, and I teach my kids to this day, that you don't do it callously, but you have to look at the person and say, you know, are you Tommy Smith's mother? Yes, I am. Miss Smith, I'm sad to inform you that your son is dead. Yeah. You're not going to get past, as my granny would say, you're not going to get past the squalor. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. People are going to beat their chest and rent their clothing in two and all the, you know, everything you can think of. There's no way to soft pedal this. Now, talking about delivering information, one thing I can prove that I've seen borne out in my practice was that, and I've heard people say this, you know, they say that when you make a death notification, that the people that you're providing this information to, they literally hear probably less than 10% of everything you vocalize to them. So I would say these things to these family members, and you rarely get past the idea of your loved one is dead, okay? And then anything else you say after that is falling on deaf ears. So I would get phone calls like 3, 4, 5 times after the initial contact where they're asking me the same questions that I had previously answered. And it's not because these people are fools or they're stupid or anything like that. It's that they're shocked. You've essentially pulled the pin on a grenade and thrown it into a room and closed the door behind you. And that's what you've done. And they're in a concussed state, kind of in a psychic sense. And so you give them this information, and first off, you have to leave, you have to provide, I don't know of any application where business cards are a better tool to have at your disposal with all of the information contained on it so that they can get back in contact with you. And I would leave 2, 3, 4 sometimes in case they misplace them, because they're going to have to call you back, because you're going to know that they're not going to believe that it's happened. They're in denial. And the next step is the tactile nature of death. It's like watching a mama dog with her pups, and when the pups passes away, the mama nuzzles the dog, does everything to the pup. We're tactile creatures. Families want to touch bodies, and of course that brings us back to forensics. And that's got some hard bark on it, guys. When you tell them, look, man, I can't let you touch your child, because at that point in time, the child is no longer a child, particularly if it's a homicide.
It's evidence.
Biggest piece of evidence. Yeah, it's the biggest piece of evidence, and that's another layer to all of this.
But that's perfectly understandable, though. I mean,
it is for us. It is. Yeah.
Even for them. I mean, they know what has happened. They're looking at their dead child, and as an investigator, and this is going to sound a little bit cruel, we're expecting him to go through the 5 stages of death in just a few minutes, and that's really unfair. Yeah. Like you said, they're going to go through the denial. So we will have to discuss that later, but for right now, your child is evidence. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I guess I'm trying to amend it and put a nice face on it, but we're asking the family to go through a hell of a lot in just such a short amount of time.
I totally...
Yeah, you are. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Julie.
No, it's okay. I remember when I used to go out on child protection investigations where there'd been an allegation made against, let's just say, for example, an allegation's made against Dad. So we go out and we investigate it, and we say to Dad, listen, it's going to take a few days for us to really get to the bottom of this, so we can ask you to leave the family home while we do that. And if you don't leave the family home, the children need to. So, and you're expecting people to kind of go through all of these phases and understand exactly what it is you're saying and how you're trying to kind of support but also investigate, and those kind of very different complexities of the work that we do in a matter of minutes. And it just doesn't happen that way, does it? It doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. And that's one of the big problems. I wrote a piece some time back and about death in our culture and the way we view it. And I talked about, I'm going to digress a little bit here, but I talked about how in the world that we live in, I made mention in one of my writings that, we pass through space age like doors, touched by hands of those people that never loved or cared for us. And then some person shows up with perfect hair and takes you to an oddly lit building where they perfuse your body, and so that people can stand over your corpse with a PowerPoint playing containing images and music that you may not have even wanted yourself or what was left of yourself to be remembered by. And that's the world that we live in. Our ancestors didn't do that, and I think, we've become so plasticine, with everything that we do. And even, everything is marked, by procedure now. I mean, everything that we do. In the past, if one of our, as we say in the South, one of our kin had been harmed or killed, there would be knife on somebody's blade that night, that we would have gone out and taken care of the situation ourselves, very primal. There would be screaming and hollering. My grandmother used to tell stories of, taking the finest door in the house off the hinges and putting it between two chairs, stripping the body of the dead down and cleaning the body. And, the body would be waked for days on end, and people would be allowed to cry and carry on and do all that. And humans need to be able to do that, and they're not allowed to do that, guys. They're not. They package it. It's all packaged and they send you out the door. And that's not just in the funeral services, that's in ME's offices, and they try to soft pedal everything to everybody and saying, we're going to take care of you, we're going to provide these services, and all this sort of thing. Death ain't supposed to be easy. It's not supposed to be easy. I think that we've made it very easy in our culture, probably too easy. Because nobody ever has to lay hands on the dead to take care of them anymore. We brush it off to somebody else. And that's a hard pill for a lot of people, and a lot of people out there to swallow, I think.
Mm.
I noticed in the book you wrote, Blood Beneath My Feet, and that's the journey of a Southern death investigator, and that came out in 2012. I noticed you talked about things like being in a cooler with a pile of decomposing humans for so long that you had to shave the hair off your body in order to get rid of the smell. So I was going to say that a lot of that we don't see on TV.
No.
What I'm saying is that could you give us in a brief kind of way what the day-to-day life is on someone that does death investigation or examining and medical examiner? Like what is it that you go through like that? I think a lot of people don't realize.
In that same chapter, I allude to the fact that we give deference to one another that practice in that field as if we're primates, and we, no other. There's not too many other professions where you'll walk over to a friend and you'll say, "Do I smell like decomp?" And this is maybe not after you've been in the morgue working to dissect body or prosect bodies, but just after you've been on a scene with a decomposing body, or you just had to go over to the morgue. You would walk up to somebody and say, "Do I smell like decomp?" Because many times, you might want to go out to lunch with your friends or something like that, and you have this aroma that travels with you, this perfume of death, as some people have called it, and it inhabits your clothing. I mean, it gets into you even at a molecular level. And in that particular case, that case the story behind that case stems from a jackup barge in the Gulf of Mexico that capsized trying to beat a hurricane back to port. And also, I think it's 16 guys. They were all lost. And the bodies came in slowly over a period of weeks, and we had to get actually a refrigerator truck from Piggly Wiggly, of all places, because we had our normal volume of cases that we have to deal with. And so we have a refrigerator truck, and so I'm out there just working these 16 bodies, and we had to take the jaws out of all the bodies, try to put tissue builder into the fingertips to raise a print. We had to clip off some of their fingers in order to facilitate the rolling of a print just to get them positively identified. None of these guys had identification on the bodies, but their manifest, we had to ship, a list, but they were all unrecognizable, many of them. Because of sea life and, the warm waters of the Gulf, it promotes decomposition. So, and that's not a typical day, but on one hand, you have to anticipate that that's going to happen, because it will a couple of times a year where you're infused with that essence of death, that travels with you. And people, they particularly nowadays, they're so enamored with death. And from a forensic standpoint, I've come across a few people over the course of my career that were enamored by death for other reasons other than forensics, and we won't go into that in this show. But you come across these folks, and it's so foreign to them. It's so foreign. And again, I think that a lot of that has to do with the idea that it's so encapsulated now. People are so pushed away from it, and they don't see the nastiness behind it. But there's some of us that have to view it regularly, on a regular basis. And I'm not just talking about homicides. I'm just talking about, natural deaths that are found dead, decomposing bodies that have no answers to them, motor vehicle accidents, suicides. I don't think that people out there really realize how many suicides take place in the U.S. And some locations, they outnumber homicides almost 3-1, but you don't hear about it unless it's somebody that the media values, like Robin Williams. Robin Williams' life had no more value to it than anybody else. It's like Jean Bonnet. How many books has that little angel had written about her? Well, I don't know, 26 or something like that. Well, when I was in Atlanta, I had any number of little girls in Atlanta that went missing and were found dead, and they never made it through a single news cycle because the media didn't deem them worthy.
Well, Joseph, do you think that people maybe aren't enamored with the thought of death? They're enamored with the solving of a crime, because we're inundated with crime shows that go from the death to the guy in prison within 44 minutes.
Yeah.
And maybe they think that it's really that easy. They don't really have to stand in the freezer with the dead bodies, or they don't have to stand over the dead body while the autopsy is taking place. Let's look at CSI. We're getting a DNA match in several seconds while Blondie brushes her hair. And that's not the reality,
Yeah, I related a story. I'll try to keep this very brief. I know time's of the essence, but I related a story right at the end of my career. As a death investigator, I'd gone out to a very wealthy area in Atlanta. We call it the Coca-Cola money, because Coca-Cola is headquartered in Atlanta, and this is near like the governor's mansion and all that sort of thing. I had a fellow that had gone into his study and taken a skeet gun. And first off, I don't have any friends that even have studies. All right, this guy had a study, and it was typical of what you would imagine. It was hardwood walls, highly polished in there, very expensive furniture. The guy had a long psychiatric history, and was on a myriad of medications. Had previously attempted suicide. When with his 12-gauge skeet gun, sat down in his leather chair and locked his study from the inside and blew his brains out. Well, there's no signs of forced injury, no signs of struggle. Guy even left a note. I had these antemortem exemplars there of his handwriting, and it appeared to match to me. I couldn't convince the wife, that this was something, that it was not a suicide, we're just going to have to part ways, begging to differ here on this particular point. And so finally I'm leaving, the driver's taking the body away. I'm walking down this long driveway to get to my car, and I can hear her heels on the pavement behind me, and she comes up behind me and says, Investigator Morgan, I've got a question for you. And I turned around and said, yes, ma'am. What's your question? And she said, you say that my husband's death was not a homicide. I said, yes, ma'am. And she says, did you sweep the room for mitochondrial DNA? And I'm thinking, how, and this is in 2005, and I'm thinking, how the hell do you even know what mitochondrial DNA is? And that it should be swept for. Well, she had, this is something she had gleaned from TV, I thought. And it's this fantasy world that people live in. I think that probably taking forensic practice out of the drama sphere that you have with shows like CSI and that sort of thing, and putting it into formats that are more true crime based stuff like ID and maybe Oxygen. I think that with those, people begin to understand, but still they don't understand how long the timeline is involved in a lot of the stuff, because it's all pre-made, and it's just kind of, it's like sausage, it's just, there's a process for doing it, and that you see on television, and obviously that's, every case has a different, sequentially and, time-wise, everything you don't work on, it's almost like sometimes you don't work on linear time, you have to backtrack all the time to put these cases together, and it's not as simple as it would be.
Yes, in reality, we'll be lucky to get a DNA match in 6 months.
Yeah, and a lot of that's going to be jurisdictionally dependent, because not everybody is up to speed. everywhere around the country. It's not just one isolated location. There's certain places that really have their stuff together and they can get it knocked out relatively quickly. But I won't say what state crime lab it is, but I'll throw this out to you, and just to give you an idea. When toxicology would be drawn at autopsy, okay, like we draw blood from the heart, urine directly from the bladder, we take vitreous fluid from the eye, we'll take bile, and then we'll do all of our tissue sections and everything and submit all of that stuff in for toxicology. Guess what those cases have to take a back seat to in state crime labs? You guys want to take a guess at that?
Uh-oh. Trivia.
Come on, Kevin.
It's kind of blatant. I mean, it's something that we're all aware of every single day, that state crime labs would actually be involved with, and it has to do with the generation of money. And that's blood alcohol. So to give you an idea in many locations as to where priorities are, these state crime labs are so overwhelmed with a number of things like drug and alcohol samples as it applies to impaired operations of vehicles that postmortem cases take a back seat. And that's just scratching the surface of things. But that gives you an idea. You'll have politicians that will go out and they'll beat their chest and they'll say, I'm going to clean this town up. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. But it's one of those things where it's a money machine. And so there's just different things that are going to trump other things. Because, well, if it was the case, if we care so much about the safety of these children, and we're always spouting off about how we want to protect children and we're going to step to the forefront and step up to the plate and do everything for kids. And, by God, kids are our future. Whitney Houston, sang about that before she killed herself with crack cocaine, just on and on and on. How laborious can it be? Yeah, you care so much about kids that you're going to send several million of them to school every single day on buses, no seatbelts. Yeah, keep preaching to me about how much you care about the kids. And so, but yet, you can't give an 8-year-old a ticket for a seatbelt. You can give a 32-year-old man a ticket for a seatbelt on the way to work. So it's all about priorities,
Yeah, but that's just we all know that makes sense, though. I mean, it's about you are responsible for this child, so we're going to ticket you.
No. Yeah, well, unless you're on a school bus. Yeah. You could ticket all the kids on the school bus, right? So, I don't know.
It's just
great that they could send a ticket to the parents at home for not having their kids belted on the seatbelt on the school bus.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a matter of priorities. I'm going far afield there, you're, as a medical legal death investigator and involved in forensics, you have to fight against. Not fight against, but you have to contend with death. And death doesn't seem as death would be enough to have to contend with. And then you put, bureaucrats on top of that, and it just makes it's a dangerous stew.
I was wondering now, with seeing all the bodies and doing all of this work for so many years, has this changed your point of view personally on things like religion, whatever it may be, or after death, and things like that? Has that sort of given you a different light?
Yeah, it has. I think for me, I grew up in a Southern evangelical home. And very heavy-handed, that sort of thing. I don't. I think that many people flee to this idea that they'll say you'll hear old time preachers talk about it. Well, I ain't home till I get to heaven. These are just vessels we're walking around in. The reality is that you're walking around in it, and if you believe in God, you're walking around here for a reason. And so you can't skip over this part and get to what you perceive as the good part. It's all about the spiritual nature of it and where you're gonna go. On another level, people have asked me for years and years, because I was around death for so long, prosected so many dead bodies over the years and have been present when bodies have been prosected. They always want to know, have you, come in contact with, ghosts or anything like that? Have I been haunted? No, I haven't. I've been haunted simply by death. And the screams of those that live. I haven't had some kind of spectral visitation or anything like that. For me, I've been in places. That
was a whole other show.
However, I will say this: I've been in circumstances where I could, at least in my own sensibilities, I sensed evil. And evil is very, very real. And evil things that my mind has been subjected to, that I've paid a personal price for, that evil that a lot of people cannot even comprehend. I think I don't know. I mean, serial killers, over the course of my career, I've worked 3 separate series of serial killers that I was aware of. The mass killings, I think, has been something that has truly bothered me over the course of my career. There's a litany of these things. You go into the basement of a home, and a mother has her elderly mother shackled in the basement, and both of her breasts were eroded away because of untreated breast cancer. So ulcerated so bad you can see through her rib cage, you see her lungs, and she was still living for a time. And the daughter's upstairs collecting the checks. You look at that and you think, in my mind, from my beliefs, I believe that hell exists. And so, if there's a candidate, that she would be at the top of the list. I don't know. I've seen a lot of evil, and I define it as evil. I don't dance around it. It's evil to me. Many of these things that I've seen. It's the only way you can really, death bets out all the suckers. There's not a lot of gray in death. There's not a lot of fancy parlor talk and all that sort of thing that goes on. There's right and wrong, and death is the ultimate litmus test, I think.
Wow. So now, how do people get a hold of you? Do you have any contact information, or do you have anything that you like to give out and have people maybe?
Oh yeah, sure. I'm active on social media. Some of the programs that I appear on, I was just on HLN with Ashley Banfield last night. Primetime Justice.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm on there regularly. Nancy Grace, I'm on there probably 3 or 4 times a week. That's Sirius XM channel 132. And active on social media. My Twitter handle is at medicolegal death. It's MEDCOLEGAL death. And of course, I have an active Facebook as well. People are more than I chime in and comment on. I generally post a lot of forensic articles things that interest me, that I find interesting, ongoing death investigations, and things that kind of impact us relative to all this. And, of course, you can find me at Jacksonville State University. It's jsu.edu. And we have a tremendous forensics program, one of the oldest in the South, from an investigative standpoint, as opposed to, lab coat forensic scientists. We do a lot of work, with local police departments. We actually have a Center for Applied Forensics, which we serve 7 counties in northeast Alabama with forensic services. And so we're very active in that sense as well.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. And don't forget you have a book out, Blood Beneath My Feet. And you can get that at Amazon, of course, or any good bookstore.
Yeah, it's available electronically and available in print.
Wow. Okay, our guest has been Joseph Scott Morgan. He's the death doctor, and thank you for being on the show.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be with you guys. I'm humbled that you would have me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you.
You bet.
To find out more about our show, guests, or to listen to past shows from our archive, please go to www.houseofmysteryradio.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.